It looks like it will be almost impossible to get out, said Johnny, and it's going to take an awful lot of advice and skill. He was uneasy about the state Turl was in. Their conference was already 2 days late. They were meeting in an abandoned mine drift, a workings 50 feet underground and a mile south of the defense base. It was dusty, the timbers sagged. It was a dangerous place as well, due to the possibility of cave-in. Turl had come silently to the base, having parked his ground car some distance away, under brush and in a ravine, and then he'd walked the rest of the distance in the night, a mining heat shield covering his head. Silently and with gestures, he had nearly made the night sentry, who had almost shot him, as he appeared so mysteriously, go and get Johnny. He had then led Johnny to the abandoned drift and checked around them with a probe. Woohoo! But the monster did not seem to be attending to what was going on. Johnny had shown him the pictures of the load on the portable viewer. He brought it and he explained about the overheating motors, about the wind. Turl had emitted a few mutters, but little else. For Turl was a very worried silo. When the crowd had arrived at the semi-annual firing, Turl had been efficiently going down the line, checking them out. He was almost 2/3 finished when he found himself face to face with him. The newcomer had his head down and the dome firing helmet was too clean to see through. But there was no mistaking. It was Jade. Turl had seen her once whilst a student at the school. There had been a crime nobody had ever learned about, and Jade had been the agent who appeared to handle it. He was not a company agent. He was a member of the dreaded Imperial Bureau of Investigation, the IBI itself. There was no mistaking him. Round, jowled face, left front fang splintered, discoloured mouth and eye bones, mange eroding his pores. It was Jade, all right. It was such a shock that Turl had not been quick-witted enough to go on with the inspection. He had simply passed on the rest of the line. Jade didn't seem to notice, but the great IBI never missed anything. What was he doing here? Why was he here? Why had he come to this planet? On the incoming receipt forms, he was simply listed as SNIT, as designated as General Labour. This meant to Turl that Jade must be undercover. But why? It was nymphs messing with payrolls? Or, and Turl shuddered, was it the animals and the gold? His first impulse was to load up blast rifles and rush over and wipe out the animals, return the vehicles and claim it was all Nymph's idea, and that he had had to step in and handle it. For 2 days, however, Turl waited to see whether Jade would sidle up to him and confide. He gave the fellow every chance, but Jade simply went into the general labour force at the local mine. Turl didn't dare to put on a bussing camera near him. Jade would detect that. He didn't dare interrogate the workers around Jade to see if the questions the agent was asking. Jade would hear it right back. No bussing cameras appeared in Turl's area. Probes detected no remote devices beaming in on him. A very tense Turl then decided to be very wary and wait for the first outgoing dispatch box, where Jade might possibly put a report into it. Sitting there, looking at the load on the screen, Turl gradually forced himself to focus his eyes. Yes, it did appear difficult. He knew it would be. You say wind, said Turl. Overheats the motors. A flying drill platform would not be able to hold itself in place long enough to do any effective work. The miner and Turl stirred. Long spike rods driven into the cliffside. One could build a platform on that. It's precarious, and the rods, they sometimes hold. One would have the place to land on top. Blast a flat place out. Johnny flipped the slide and showed him the crack. The possibility of the whole load shearing off and plummeting to the bottom of the gorge. Can't blast. Drills, said Turl. Possibly flatten a place with just drills. Tedious, but it could be done. Fly back to the cliff edge, drill through to the chasm. He was drifting off. He was abstracted. Johnny realized that Turl was scared of something, and he realized something else. If this project were abandoned, Turl's first action would be to kill all of them, either to cover evidence or just out of plain sadism. Johnny decided it was up to him to keep Turl interested. That might work, says Johnny. What? Drilling from the back of the chasm toward it, keeping his ship out of the wind while it hovers? Oh, yeah, yeah, right, whatever. Johnny knew that he was losing him. To Turl, it wasn't a screen in front of him, it was a face of Jade. I haven't shown you the core, says Johnny. He tilted the portable lamp and brought the core out of his pocket. It was an inch in diameter and 6 inches long. Why-hey! Long, pure, white-tipped, why-hey, and gleaming gold. Johnny tipped it about so it sparkled. Turl came out of his abstraction. What a beautiful specimen. Why-hey! He took hold of it. With one talon, he delicately dented the gold. Pure gold! He fondled it. Why-hey! Suddenly he saw himself on a silo, powerful and rich, living in a mansion, doors open to him everywhere, talons pointing at streets with whispers. That's Turl! Beautiful, says Turl. Beautiful. Just like a turkey. After a long time, Johnny said, We'll try to get it out. Turl stood up in the narrow drift and dust eddying around the lamp. He still fondly gripped his core. You keep it, says Johnny. Suddenly, as though the core were hot. No, says Turl. You must hide it. Bury it in a hole. My hole? In a hole. All right. We'll try to mine the load. Yes, says Turl. Johnny breathed a pent-up sigh of relief. But at the drift entrance before they parted, Turl said, No radio contact. None. Do not overfly the compound. Skim the mountains to the east. Fly low, leaving and arriving at the base. Take a temporary second brace up in the hill and do your shifts from that. And stay away from the compound. I'll see the females are fed. I should go over and tell them they'll be seeing me for a while. Why? They worry. Johnny saw that Turl couldn't comprehend that and amended it quickly. They might make a fuss and create a disturbance. Right. You can go over there once more in the dark. Here, have a heat shield. You know where my quarters are. Flash a dim light 3 times. You could just let me take the girls over to base. No, you don't, says Turl, patting the remote control box. You're still under my orders. Johnny watched as he rumbled off and vanished into the night. Fear was preying on Turl, and in that state, Turl would vacillate and change his mind. It was a troubled Johnny who went back to the base. They were overflying the load area. Johnny, Robert the Fox, the 3 near duplicates, and the shift leaders. They were high up and the air was crystal clear. The mountains spread grandly about them. They were looking for a possible landing site back from the chasm. Aye, 'tis the devil's own problem, said Robert the Fox. Impossible terrain, said Johnny. No, I don't mean that, said Robert the Fox. This is Turl Demon. On the one hand, we have to keep the mining going and fruitful, but on the other, the last thing I'd want for him to succeed. Sorry about the Irish. I know he's meant to be Scottish. I know very well he'd kill us all if he's his last hope, but I'd rather be dead than see him win. Time is on our side, said Johnny, turning the plane around for another pass over the edge. Aye, time, says Robert the Fox. Time has a nasty habit of disappearing, like the wind from a bagpipe. If you haven't made it by 991, we are finished. McTaylor, cried Donadine from the back. Put your eyes on that space about 200 feet back from the edge. A bit west, it looks flatter. There was a bark of laughter from the others. No one down there, nothing down there was flat. From the edge and back the terrain has tumbled like a miniature Alps, all stone outcrops and sharp-toothed boulders. No place was flat enough to even set the plane down. Take over, Donadine, said Johnny. He slid sideways and let the Scot into the pilot's seat. Johnny made sure he had control, then went into the back. Hey. He picked up a coil of explosive cord and began to put himself into a harness. The others helped him. I want you to hold back about 10 feet above that spot. I'll go down, woohoo, and try a bit of blasting flat. No, said Robert the Fox. He gestured at David McKean, the shift leader. Take that away from him, Davy. You're not to be so bored yourself, McTaylor. Sorry, said Johnny. I know these mountains. Hey. It was so illogical that it stopped Robert the Fox. He laughed. You're a bunny lad, McTaylor. I know a bit wild. Donaldine had them hovering over the spot where Johnny wrestled the door to get it open. Proves I'm not Scottish, then. The others didn't laugh. They were too tense with concern. The plane was making small jumps and jerks, and the sharp ground bobbed up and down below. Even here, 200 feet from the edge, there was wind. Johnny was lowered to the ground and let the pickup rope go slack. Not too much blast or that cliff would shear off again. It might even break off downward. Johnny examined the ground around and gave a close, sharp tooth. He grinded at it with the explosive cord and, getting it as low and as level as possible, he set the fuse. With a wave of his hand, the pickup rope tightened and he yanked him into the air. He hung there, spinning in the wind. The explosive cord flashed and the roar racketed down the mountains, echoing. They lowered him again into the wind-whipped dust, and with a spike gun he drove a spike into the rock he had blasted loose. A line came down to him and he put it through the eye of the spike. If he had judged correctly, the tooth should shear away. He was hauled up higher, the plane's motors screaming in advance. The rock came away. They lowered the pickup line and he cut the whole cord with a clipper. None of this makes any bloody sense. The huge rock bounded into a hollow, leaving a flat space where it had stood. For an hour, grounded and hauled away alternately, Johnny worked. Some of the blasted rock fell into nearby hollows. Gradually, a flattish platform 50 feet in diameter materialized 200 feet back from the cliff edge. The plane landed. David, the shift leader, crept over the broken ground to the crack 30 feet from the edge. The wind buffeted his bonnet, and he had a measuring instrument down the crack. Why, hey! I'm sorry for doing the sarcastic comments, but it's been written in such a way that by modern standards it just comes across as double entendre homosexual. Anyhow, he put a measuring instrument down into this crack that would tell him if it had widened in the future. Oh, sorry, I've had gin. Johnny went over to the edge of the cliff and with Thor holding his ankles tried to look under it to see the load. He couldn't. The cliff face was not vertical. The others clambered around, seeing what they could see. Johnny came back to the plane. His hands were scraped. This place had to be worked with mittens. He asked the old woman to make some. Well, said Robert the Fox, we got down. The daily recon drone rumbled in the distance. They had their orders. The three near duplicates of Johnny dove for the plane and out of sight. Johnny stood out in the open. La 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 la! There was plenty of time. The sharp click of the sonic boom hit them like a club as the recon drone went overhead. The plane and ground shook. The drone dwindled into the distance. I hope the vibrations of that thing, said Dumbledore emerging, don't split the cliff. Johnny gathered the others around him. We have a supply point now. First thing to do is pound a security fence so nothing can slide off, and construct a shift shelter. Right? They nodded. Tomorrow, said Johnny, we'll bring 2 planes, one loaded with equipment and the other equipped to drive rods. We'll try to construct a working platform to mine the load, balanced on the rods into the cliff just below the vein. Survey from up here, and they'll see what sort of equipment we will need for the safety rails, ore buckets and so on. They got to work to mine the gold they didn't want but had to have. Gold was the bait in the trap. Johnny lay in the dead grass on a knoll and studied the far-off compound through a pair of silo infrared night glasses. He was worried about Chrissy. 2 months had gone by and he felt their chances were worsening. The only blessing was that the winter snows were late, but not the winter cold, and the wind sighing through the night was bitter. The huge night glasses were icy to the touch. The binocular character on them made them hard to use. The 2 eyepieces, being silo, were so far apart he could only use them one at a time. The faint light of the dying moon reflected from the snow-capped peak behind him gave a faint luminescence to the plain. He was trying to see fire. From this vantage point he knew by experience he should be able to. So far he could not even find the tiniest pinpoint of it. The last time he had seen her 2 months ago, he had piled a cage with wood, given her some wheat to boil and even a few late radishes and lettuces, all from the winter's winnowing from the old woman's garden. She had a fair supply of smoked meat, but it would not last forever. He had tried rather unsuccessfully to clear her up and to give her confidence. He himself was never feeling that. He had also given her one of the stainless steel knives the Scout had found, and she had pretended to be amazed and delighted with it, and the way it could scrape a hide and cut thin strips of meat. In all these 2 months he had not heard from Turl. Forbidden to go to the compound, having no radio contact, he had waited in vain for Turl to come to the base. Perhaps Turl thought they had moved. True, they had put down the emergency camp near the mine site down in the hidden valley. They had moved extra machines, supplies, and the 3 shifts for the load, and one of the old women to cook and wash for them. There was an abandoned mining village there, and it took a short flight to the load. The efforts to mine the veins were not going well. They had driven the steel bars into the cliff and tried to build a platform, but the wind, meeting resistance, kept flexing the rods to the point of contact with the cliff, and the section there would become red hot. It was daredevil work. 2 rods had already broken, and only safety lines had saved the Scots from plummeting 1,000 feet to their deaths. 2 months' work in bitter and ferocious winds, and they had only a few pounds of wire gold to show for it. Gold grabbed, as it were, on the fly. This was the 5th night he had lain there, and looked in vain for the fire that should be there. 5 nights before, not seeing the fire, they had sent a scout. There had been a row with the council and the others when they found that he was determined to slip in there himself. They had literally barred the door on him. Robert the Fox had become cross with him and shouted into his ear that chiefs don't scout. They might raid, but never scout. It was too dangerous for him. He was not expendable. He had argued and found the rest of the castle taking him to Robert's side. And when the other Scots heard the raised voices, they came and stood around the council, as they had a right to do. They said and added their arguments against his taking senseless risks with his person. It had been quite a row, and they were right. They had sent, as a compromise, young Fergus. He went off like a shadow through the cold moonlight, and they waited out the hours. Somehow young Fergus got home. He was badly wounded. The flesh of his shoulder had been seared like beef. He had gotten almost to the small plateau in front of the cage. The moon had set by then. There was no fire in the cage, but there was something new at the compound. Sentries. The area was patrolled by 1 armed silo near the cages, and 1 or more guards was walking the perimeter of the compound. The guard at the cage had fired at a shadow. Fergus had gotten away only by howling like a wolf in pain. For the sentry supposed he had shot a wolf, common enough on these plains. Fergus was in the makeshift hospital now, shoulder packed in bear grease and herbs. He would get well, clucked up by one of the old women. He was triumphant rather than cowed, for he had proven the majority opinion was right. The other Scots, singly and in groups, informed MacTyler that the point was proven beyond any doubt. A chief must not go on a scout. A raid, yes, but a scout, no. I wouldn't want to go on a scout. I wouldn't mind going on the Girl Guide. Ha ha! The parson had consoled Johnny. In Johnny's quarters, when they were alone, he said, well, it isn't that they don't feel you can do it. Nor even actually that maybe they themselves couldn't go on it if something happened to you. It's just that, well, they're fond of you, laddie. It's you who's given us the hope. Lying in the tall grass using binoculars built for an alien face, Johnny did not feel much hope. Here they were, a tiny group of a vanishing race on a planet itself small and out of the way, confronting the most powerful and advanced beings in all the universes. From galaxy to galaxy, the system to system, world to world, the silos were supreme. They had smashed every sentient race that had ever sought to oppose them, and even those that had tried to cooperate were destroyed. With advanced technology and a pitiless temperament, the silos had never been successfully opposed in all the rapacious eons of their existence. Johnny thought of the trench, of the 67 cadets with pathetically inadequate weapons trying to stop a silo tank and dying for it, taking with them the last hope of the human race. No, not the last hope, thought Johnny. 1,000 or more years later, here were the Scots and himself. But what a forlorn hope. One casual sortie from that compound with 1 old silo ground tank, and the hope would be ended. Yes, thought Johnny, and the Scots could probably attack that compound. They could probably wipe out several mine sites, and even end this present occupation. But the silo company would sweep in and extort a revenge that would end it all forever. Yes, he had a potential weapon, but not only did he not have any uranium, he didn't even have a detector. He had nothing at all to tell him where to look, or even whether something was uranium. He and the Scots had a very forlorn hope indeed. He put the binoculars on a maximum magnification, one last sweep on their sleeping compound, way over there. Night lights, green pinpoints under the domes, but no yellow-orange fire. He was about to give it up for the night when his sweeping glasses picked up the fuel dump. There were a pile of the cartridges that powered the machines, a bit distant, safely away from the case, just in case of a blow-up. But there were explosive magazines, plenty of empty explosives for mining. But even blowing the whole thing up would not really jar the compound. And there were the battle planes, 20 of them, lined up on the ready line. Across the transshipment area from the battle planes, the distant from all the rest but closest to the cage area, was the breathe gas dump. The company didn't care how much breathe gas it stockpiled. In huge drums and small mask bottles, there must be enough breathe gas there to last a mining operation 50 years. It was piled higgledy-piggledy. It was never checked out. Machine operators simply picked up canisters for the canopies and masks. There was too much of it to require conservation. The glasses swept on. Johnny was looking for sentries now. He found one of them. The silo was waddling lazily through the dark between the breathe gas dump and the transshipment platform. Yes, there was another one up on the plateau near the cage. Suddenly Johnny swept the glasses back to the breathe gas dump. Aside from a half-dozen trodden paths, the place was, surrounded by tall grass and weeds, and the undergrowth and the ground cover stretched back to the horizon. He brought the glasses back to the breathe gas dump. Suddenly, with a surge of hope, he knew he had his uranium detector. Breathe gas. A small bottle of it would let out through the regulator the minute quantities required for masks. If one let out a little bit of breathe gas escape in the vicinity of radiation, it would make a small explosion. A Geiger counter reacted when the radiation activated gas in a tube. Or so the old books told him. Well, breathe gas didn't just react, it bloody well violently exploded. Dangerous sort of, instrument, maybe, but with care it might just work. Johnny snaked back off the knoll. 20 minutes later at the base, he was saying to the council, "A chief mustn't go on a scout, right?" Aye, they all agreed. Glad he had gotten the point at last. But he can't go on a raid. They became stiffly alert. I may have solved the problem of the uranium detector, says Johnny. Tomorrow night, we're going on a raid. Johnny crept toward the plateau near the cage. The moon had set. The night was dark. The sounds of distant wolves mingled with the moan of the icy wind. Ahoo! That one was the gay wolf. He heard above it the click of equipment as the sentry moved. Things had definitely not gone well tonight. The first plan had been aborted, like a poor baby. Making for last-minute changes. All afternoon, a mixed herd of buffalo and wild cattle had been ideally located upon the plain. It was said that when the winter was going to be a bad one, buffalo drifted down from the vastness of the north. Or perhaps it was some kind of migration to the south. Maybe it happened anyway. The wolves, long and grey, a different kind of wolf, had come with them. The wolves were still out there now, but the buffalo and cattle, they buggered off. The plan had been a stampede, the mixed herd across the compound, create a diversion. It did happen now and again, and then there would be no suspicion. But then, just as the raid was about to be launched, the herd had taken it into their heads to bugger off eastward, and were now too far away to be of any use. It was a bad omen, much like part 3 of the series. Omen 1, Omen 2, Omen 3. It meant hastily changed plans and a raid with no diversion. Dangerous. 20 Scots were scattered out there on the plains right now, among them Donaldine. They were caped and hooded, as was Johnny, with a heat-detecting fabric used in drilling. A mixture of powdered grass and glue made from the hooves had been painted over the costume, With this, that's a rather nasty way to make a bit of makeup, grinding up horsey hooves. Anyhow, the infrared would not be able to read them, and if they got seen, they would be mistaken for grass. Even visually, they could be mistaken for the general terrain. The Scots were under specific orders to converge upon the Greedgas dump. I'm sorry, too much gin. They were ordered to converge upon the breathe gas dump separately and pick up cases of small pressure cylinders and get them back to the base. The trick was to raid an enemy who would never know they had been raided. That's called for a hypno. They must not suspect that the compound and the animals were hostile. It was a raid that must look like no raid. The Scots must not take any weapons. They must not collide with any sentries. They must not leave any traces. There was some protest that Johnny was going to be seen and go to the cage. He explained, not really believing it, that this way he would be behind any sentries who might converge upon the dump if a disturbance was noted. Johnny gripped the kill club and stole forward toward the plateau, and his next ill chance was awaiting him. The horses were not there. Perhaps nervous of the wolves or seeking better grazing, they had buggered off. Through the glasses, Johnny had seen 2 of them last night. He had planned to creep up the last distance by guiding a horse alongside him. All his horses were trained to strike with the hooves and on command. And if the sentry were alerted to be hit, well, he would just simply get the silo and bash his brains in. And they could just blame it on the horsey. Poor horsey. No horses. Wait. A dim increase in blackness in the black of the bottom of the cliff ahead of him. Johnny sighed with relief at the crunch of dry grass being munched, and it came to him. But when he arrived, it was only Blodgett, the horse with a crippled shoulder. Probably not given to much wandering due to the lameness. Oh well, better Blodgett than none at all. The horse nuzzled him in greeting and obeyed the order to be silent, with a hand on Blodgett's jaw, causing the horse to stop every few feet. Looking back at the horse's shoulder protected him from the detector. The sentry could be carrying one. Johnny quietly approached the cage. If he could get within striking distance of the sentry, and if Blodgett remembered the training, and if the lame shoulder permitted, Johnny intended to take out the sentry. The silo was looming up under the reflective glow of the dim green light, burning somewhere within the dome. There was no fire in the cage. 20 feet. 15 feet, 10 feet. Suddenly the sentry turned, alerted, 10 feet away, way out of striking distance. But just as Johnny was about to launch the kill club, he saw that the sentry was listening behind him. There was a tiny whisper of cracking, and Johnny knew what it was. A radio intercom plugged into the sentry's ear. Some other sentry had spoken to him over it. The silo hefted the 6 cumbersome feet of blast rifle. He muttered something inside his own helmet dome, answering the other sentry. The other sentry must be down by the dump. Had the Scot been seen? Was the operation blown? The caged sentry went lumbering off to the other side of the compound, in the direction of the dump. Whatever was going on down there, Johnny had had his own mission. He moved quickly over to the wooden barrier. "Chrissy!" he whispered as loudly as he dared into the darkness of the cage. He was met with silence. "Chrissy! Johnny!" A whisper came back, but it was Patty's voice. "Yes? Where's Chrissy?" "She's here, Johnny. She's here. Johnny, we don't have any water. The pipes froze." She sounded very weak herself, and possibly ill. There was an odor in the air. In the green dimness, Johnny spotted a pile of dead rats outside the door. Dead rats that had not been taken in and were rotting. "Do you have any food?" "Very little. We've had no firewood for a week." Johnny felt a fury rising within himself. He must be fast. They had no time. "And Chrissy?" "Her head is hot. She just lies here. She doesn't answer me, Johnny. Please help." "Hold on," said Johnny. "In a day or 2, you'll get some help. I promise. Tell Chrissy. Make her understand." He could do little right now. "Is there any ice in the pool?" "A little, and it's dirty." "Use the heat of your body to melt it. Patty, you must hold on for a day or two. I'll try. Tell Chrissy I was here. Tell her. What did girls want to hear? What could he say? Tell her that I love her. It was true enough. There was a sharp sign down by the dump. Johnny knew he shouldn't stay. He couldn't stay. Somebody down there was in trouble. Gripping Blodgett's mane to drag the horse along, Johnny ran silently to the other side of the compound. He stared down the hill toward the dump. He knew exactly where it was, but there were no lights. Yes, there was a light. A sentry flashlight flickered across the dump. 2 sentries were down there. The silhouettes against the dump showed they were 100 feet this side of it. Johnny covered himself with the horse and went down the hill. A light flickered at him. Dazzling, it passed on. Just one of those damned horses, a voice said. I tell you, there's something down there to the right of that dump. Turn on your scanner. A thudding sound came from the dump, like a box being overturned. There is something down there, said the sentry. They started to advance, flashlight playing before them. It silhouetted them to Johnny. He crept his horse forward. Johnny saw what had happened. A messily stacked tier of boxes had overturned when somebody touched one. With better night sight than the light-blinded sentries, he saw a Scot move and began to run away. No, a sentry had seen it. The sentry is raising the blast rifle to fire. What a bad night. The silence would know the animals were raiding them. The wounded or dead Scot in a heat camouflage cape would give it all away. The silence would retaliate. They'd wipe out the base. 20 feet from the sentry was shoving off the safety catch. He was aiming. The kill club struck him like a lightning bolt in the center of his back. Johnny was racing forward, unarmed now. The other sentry turned. The light hit Johnny. The silo raised the blast rifle to fire. Johnny was past him, grasping the muzzle of the huge gun. He spun it out of his paws. Johnny reversed the weapon to use the butt. There must be no shots to wake the compound. The silo turned and tried to grab him. The rifle butt crunched into the sentry's stomach, and he folded. Johnny thought he was home free, but he wasn't. The ground shook. A 3rd sentry came running up. The light from the fallen flashlight shone on the huge rushing legs. This 3rd sentry had a belt gun drawn. He was 5 feet away, raising the weapon to fire. Excuse me. Holding the blast rifle by its muzzle, Johnny whirled the butt into the 3rd one's helmet. There was a crack of splintering glass and a hoarse intake of breath. The silo went down. The 1st one was trying to get up and bring a weapon to bear. Johnny crashed the butt of the rifle down onto his chest, and his helmet came loose. He choked a strangled gasp as the air hit him. My God, Johnny agonized. 3 sentries to explain. Unless he acted, they were all for it, washed up the whole way. He forced the rage of the combat back to calmness. He heard Blodgett running off. Somewhere up in the compound, a door slammed. The place would be swarming. He stamped on the flashlight. Racking through some pockets, he searched for a thong. He found one, found 2. He pieced them together. He reached down and got hold of the sentry's 2nd blast rifle. He tied the extended thong to the trigger. Then with all of his might, he plunged the muzzle of the blast rifle into the ground, choking its bore with dirt and leaving it erect. He hunched down behind the protection of the 1st sentry's body. There were running feet coming down from the compound. Doors were slamming. They would be here any instant. He made sure he was protected from both sides of the compound and from the blast, and pulled the thong. The choked blast rifle exploded like a bomb. The corpse before him jolted. Geyser, dirt, and rocks began to fall back, but Johnny was gone. 2 hours later, with his side aching from running, Johnny came back to the base. Johnny saw Robert the Fox, who had seen that no unusual lights were on, and the place organized in case of pursuit. As the raiders came in one by one, he had the boxes of breathe gas carefully hidden in the basement and collected them all in a silent group in the faintly lit auditorium. He had 15 Scots standing by with submachine guns and passenger ships lined up in case they had to evacuate. The camouflage capes had been removed and hidden, no evidence left in sight. No precaution untaken, withdrawal, if called for, already organized. Robert the Fox was an efficient veteran of many a raid in his own homeland. Did we leave anyone? Panted Johnny. 19 came back, said Robert the Fox. Donaldine is still out there. Johnny didn't like it. He looked around at the 19 raiders in the hall. They were concentrating on getting themselves back to normal, straightening their bonnets, picking grass off themselves, winding down. A runner from the lookout with night glasses noted on top of the building came with a message. No pursuit visible. No planes have taken off. That was one devil an explosion, said Robert the Fox. It was a blast rifle that blew up, said Johnny. When the barrel is clogged, they blow back and explode the whole magazine. All 500 rounds. Sure may the echoes ring, said Robert the Fox. We heard it over here, miles away. They are alive, said Johnny. He sat panting on a bench. I've got to figure out how to get a message to Turl. Chrissy is ill. And they're without water, no firewood. The Scots tensed. One of them spat the word "thilo." I'll figure a way to get the message, says Johnny. Any sign of Donaldine? He called to a messenger at the door. The messenger went off to the lookout. The group waited. Minutes ticked on. Half an hour went by. They were strained. Finally, Robert the Fox stood up and said, Well, bad as it is, we better... There was a thud of running feet. Donaldine came racing through the door and sank down panting. He was not just panting, he was also laughing. No sign of pursuit, the messenger shouted in. The tension vanished. Donaldine delivered a box of breathe gas vials, and the parson rushed it off to hide in case of search. No planes have taken off, the messenger yelled into the room. Well, for now, laddie, says Robert the Fox, unless the devils are waiting for daylight. They won't come, said Donaldine. Others were drifting into the room. Submachine guns were being uncocked. Pilots came in from the passenger standby planes. Even the old women were peering into the door. Nobody knew yet what had gone wrong out there. Donaldine had his breath, and the parson was moving around, serving out small shots of whiskey. I stayed behind to see what they would do. The cheerful face of Donaldine said, Oh, if you should have seen her, Johnny. He gave a highly colourful account. He had been one of the last ones to reach the dump, and when he touched the box, the whole pile of them fell over. He fled, zigzagging, but circled back in case Johnny needed help. But helping he did not help, and he told them how Johnny had killed the 3 silos with his own bare hands and a rifle butt, and blown the whole lot to sky high, and he looked like a David fighting 3 Goliaths. There wouldn't be any pursuit. I hid behind the horse 200 feet away and moved it closer when the silos all met at the bodies. The horse wasn't hit in the blast, but a piece of gun was slashed into the buffalo that was standing near the dump. Yeah, I saw the buffalo and I nearly ran into it. Is that what the shadow was? Murmured various raiders. I'm sorry, the page got stuck. Some big silo, maybe your demon. Johnny, he came on down and flashed lights around, and they figured out the buffalo would overturn the boxes, and the sentries had gone hunting on watch. Oh, they were cross at the sentries for doing that, and stumbled and dug the bastard into the dirt, and it went off and killed them. Johnny expelled a sigh of relief. He hadn't known about the buffalo, but he had intended them to think the rest of it. He had even rediscovered and recovered the burned-off thong. The explosion would have masked the other damage, and he'd found his kill club in a mad last-minute escape. Yes, there was no evidence. What a raid, exulted Donaldine, and ooh, what a bonny chief for Johnny is. Johnny sipped at the whiskey the parson gave him to hide his embarrassment. You're a scamp, said Robert the Fox. You might have been caught. Aye, but be you the moon man, you'd heard who? Donaldine had slipped slightly into dialect. They wanted to parade the pipers, but Robert the Fox would give no clue to the eyes of a watching enemy that tonight was any different. So he sent the mini-skirted Scotsman off to bed. Well, thought Johnny, as he settled down on the wool-plaid blanket, they had the uranium detector? Possibly. But that didn't help Chrissy. That perky white blonde needed help. No radio, no personal contact. How was he ever going to force Turl to come over? A haggard, nervous Turl approached the rendezvous. He drove his armoured ground car with one paw and held the other on the firing triggers of the fully charged heavy guns. He had not figured out Jay's presence on Earth. The Imperial Bureau of Investigation, the agent for that organization, had been assigned a lowly ore sorting post by personnel. Turl had not dared suggest any assignment. An ore sorter only worked when there was ore coming up from the end of shifts, and a fellow could disappear off that post for hours and not be missed, and reappear as if he'd been there the whole time. Turl dared not put surveillance equipment near him, for Jade was a past master at that, after decades in the IBI. Turl had tried to get Jade involved with Chirk, his secretary. He offered Chirk wild promises if she could get off of Jade and do some nookie with him. Get a button camera, bit of recording, bit of video, dodgy. And he was going to get one of the smallest button cameras he could find, about the size of a mole, and stick it somewhere. But Jade, he paid no attention to her. He had just gone on shuffling about, head down, giving the exact appearance of an employee up to absolutely bugger all. But what else? That was how the IBI would work. With shaking paws, Turl had ransacked the dispatch boxes to her home planet. There was nothing from Jade in them. No new types of reports, no strange alterations of routine paper. Turl had spent agonizing nights going through the traffic. He could find nothing. Rumbling about, feeling like he was spinning, Turl had tried to figure out whether the IBI had invented some new means of communication. The company and the imperial government did not invent things. They had not, to Turl's knowledge, for the last 100,000 years. But still, there could always be something he didn't know about, like writing on ore samples being shipped through, but it would take specially designed ore. There was no departure he could find. The imperial government was usually only interested in the company's ore volumes. The government got a percentage, but it also could intervene in matters of serious crime or intended crime. Turl could not find what Jade was doing, and the appearance of a deadly secret agent on the base with falsified papers had not permitted Turl a single relaxed moment for the past 2 months. He did his own work with the fury of impeccable thoroughness, quite foreign to him. He got through investigations at once, he answered all dispatches at once, anything questionable in his files was buried or destroyed at once. Turl had even personally overhauled and fueled and charged the 20 battle planes in the field, so he would appear alert and efficient. He had filed a banal report about the animals. They were dangerous posts in mining slopes I could not get into, and it was an experiment ordered by Nymph. He had rounded up a few animals to see whether or not they could run simple machines. Different types of machines. The animals were not dangerous. They were actually stupid and slow to learn. It did not cost the company anything, and it might increase their profits in case the equipment worked out. Or the experiment might work. It was not very successful, at least not yet, anyway. Nothing was taught the animals about metallurgy or warfare, both because of company policy and because they were stupid. They ate rats, a vermin plentiful upon this planet. He sent a report through with no priority. He was covered, or so he hoped. But 15 times a day, Turl decided he should wipe out the animals and return the machines to storage. And 15 times a day, he decided to go on with it. Just a little bit longer. Just a little bit longer. The Century affair had disturbed him. Not because silos had been killed, he needed the dead bodies for his plan, but because one of the Centuries, when Turl put the body in the coffin for transshipment next year, had had a criminal brand burned into the fur of his chest. This 3-bar brand was put on criminals by the imperial government. It represented somebody barred from justice procedures, barred from government employment. It meant the personnel department on the home planet was careless. He had made an innocuous report about this. For a flaming moment of hope, he thought that perhaps Jade might be investigating that, or looking for some such person. But when he had a fellow employee mention it casually to Jade, no interest had been shown. Turl simply could not find out what Jade was looking for, nor why Jade was there. The tension, the uncertainty of it had brought him near to perpetual hysteria. And this morning, out of the blue, the animal had done something that literally stood Turl's fur on end with terror. He exposed his penis. No, he didn't. As was his usual practice, Turl was stripping the day's photos from the recon drone receiver when he found himself looking at a photo of the mine site with a sign on it. There, sharp and clear, at the load, was the animal steadying a huge 12 by 12 foot sign. It was resting on a flat place the animals had made back of the load. In clearest silo script, it said, "Urgent, meeting vital, same place, same time." That was bad enough, but the machine tarpaulin seemed to have fallen over the last part of the sign. There was another line. It said, Turl could not read the rest of it. The stupid animal apparently had not noticed part of its sign was obscured. With shaking paws, Turl had tried to find another frame in the sequence that looked at the tarpaulin. He could not. Panic gripped him. Gradually his scattered wits collected down to seething anger. The panic died and tried, but he realized that this was his only recon drone receiver on the planet. The telltale on the side of it showed that whether anything else was receiving was mute. He daily watched these photos and had exactly tracked the progress of the load. The animal had captured always seemed to be there with the crew. While all these animals looked pretty much the same, he thought he would recognize the blonde beard and the size of the one he had trained. This usually reassured him, for it seemed to me the animal was busy and not wandering around elsewhere. The progress of the load was minimal, but he knew the problems of mining it, and he also knew they might solve them without his advice. He had months to go, 4 months, more actually, before day 92. He got over his panic and shredded the photos. Jade had no possible access to them. But to directly link Turl with the project was not going to be allowed. He began to imagine that the sign had started with his name and regretting having shredded it quite so fast. He should have made sure. Maybe it did start Turl. Turl was not introspective enough to realize that he was bordering upon insanity. The darkness spread like a black sack over the tank. He had been driving on instruments without lights. It was treacherous terrain. An old city had been here once, but it was now just a honeycomb of abandoned mine holes, where the company had followed an old deposit centuries before. Something showed on his detector, right ahead on the screen, something alive. His paw rested lightly upon the firing knob, ready to blast. He cautiously made sure he was headed away from the compound and masked by a hill and ancient walls. Then he turned on a dim inspection light. The animal was sitting upon a horse at the rendezvous point. It was a different horse, a wild horse, nervous because of the tank. The dim green tank light bathed the rider. There was someone else. No, it was just another horse. It had a large pack on its back. Turl swept scanners around. No, there was nobody else here. He looked back at the animal. Turl's paw quivered an inch above the firing lever. Or lever. The animal did not seem to be alarmed. The interior of the tank was compressed with breathe gas, but Turl also had on a breathe gas mask. He adjusted it to be sure. Turl picked up the intercom unit and pushed it through the atmosphere-tight firing port. The unit fell to the ground outside the tank. Turl picked up the interior unit. Get down off that horse. I pick up this intercom. Johnny slid off the half-broken horse and approached the tank. He picked up the unit from the ground and looked through the tank ports for Turl. He could see nothing. The interior was dark and the glass was set to block a view. Through the intercom, Turl said, "Did you kill those sentries?" Johnny held the outside unit to his face. He thought fast. His Turl was in a very strange state. "We haven't lost any sentries," he said. "You know the sentries I mean, at the compound." "Have you had trouble?" The word trouble almost made Charles' head spin. He didn't know what trouble was, had, or what kind of trouble, or from where. He started to get a grip on himself. You obscured the last part of that sign. Oh, said Johnny innocently. He obscured it on purpose, of course, so that Turl would come. It meant to say, the winter is advancing, and we need your advice. Turl simmered down. Advice? About what? He knew about what. It was next to impossible to get that gold. But there had to be a way. He was a minor, top student of the school, actually, and he studied the recon drone daily's pictures daily. He knew about flexing rods, and he would not let them build a platform. You need a portable shaft stairway. You've got one in your equipment. You nail it to the outside face and work from it. Oh, okay. Well, but we'll try that then. He had Turl calmer now, and that was a routine subject of interest. We also need some protection in case of uranium. Why? There's uranium in those mountains, says Johnny. In the gold? I don't think so, but in the valleys and in the surrounding area. Johnny thought he had better emphasize to Turl was barred from those places. He also wanted to be desperate for data. He could not experiment with uranium without protection from it. I've seen men turn blotchy from it, he said. I mean, this was actually true, but not his own crew. This seemed to cheer Turl up. No crap, you get blotchy? What gear protects one? There's always radiation around a planet like this with the sun like this, small amounts. That's why these breathed masks have lead glass in their faceplates. That's why all the canopies are lead-lined. You don't have any. It's lead that protects one. You'll just have to take your chances, says Turl. He was getting amused, feeling better. They're suffering. Can you turn the lights up here, he asked. There was a thump as he laid his sack on the flat section in front of the windscreen. I don't want any lights. Do you think we're followed? No, that spinning disc on the roof is a detector wave neutralizer. You needn't worry about us being traced. Johnny looked at the top of the tank. In the very dim light, he could see a thing planted there. It looked like a fan, and it was running. Turn the light on this, said Johnny. Turl looked at his screens. There were no telltales. I'll drive ahead under that tree. Johnny studied the ore sack as Turl slowly put the car under a mask of evergreens. He stopped again and turned on the light that lit up the area in front of the windshield. With a lift of his arm, Johnny spilled about 10 pounds of ore onto the tank bonnet. It flashed under the light. It's white quartz and wire gold, and it shone and glittered as though it had jewels in it. 8 pounds of it was pure wire gold from the load. Turl sat and stared through the windscreen. He swallowed hard. There's a ton of it there, says Johnny. If it can be gotten out, it's in plain view. The sailor sat back and looked at the gold through the windscreen. Johnny scattered it about so it shone even more. He picked up the intercom again. We're keeping our bargain. You must keep yours. What do you mean? Turl was getting suspicious. You promised to give food and water and firewood to the females. Pah, promises. Johnny put his arm around the gold and started to swing it back into the ore sack and then withdrew with it. The motion was not lost on Turl. Quit it! How do you know they aren't being taken care of? Johnny let the gold lie. He moved over to the side of the light and touched his face. He tapped a finger against his forehead. There's something you don't know about humans. They have psychic powers sometimes. I have psychic powers with those females. It would not do to tell Turl that, in the absence of a fire or a scout that alerted him. All's fair in love and war, as Robert the Fox would say, and this was both love and war. You mean without radios, right? Says Turl. He'd read about this. He hadn't realised these animals had it. Bloody animals. Right, says Johnny. If she is not well cared for, and she isn't all right, I know. Tapping his head again. Now, I got a pack here, says Johnny. It has food, water, and flints, and firewood, and warm roads, and a small tent. I'm going to lash it to the top of this tank, and right away when you get back, you're going to put it in the cage. Also, get the cage cleaned up inside and outside, and fix the water supply. It's just a tank, says Turl. It goes empty, needs to be topped up. I've been busy. And take those sentries away. You don't need sentries. How did you know there was sentry? You told me tonight. And my psychic powers told me they tease her. But I do more than just bloody tease her. You can't order me around, says Turl. Turl, if you don't take care of the females, I just might take it into my head to wander up to those sentries and mention something that I know. What? Just something I know. It wouldn't cause you to be fired, but it would be embarrassing. Turl suddenly vowed he had better get rid of those sentries. And you'll know if I do these things. Johnny tapped his forehead in the light. But the threat had unsettled Turl's spinning wits. On an entirely different tact, he demanded, What you do with the gold if you don't deliver it? Keep it for ourselves, says Johnny, starting to put it back in the bag. Turl snarled deep and threateningly. His amber eyes flared in the darkness of the tank. I'll be damned if you will. Leverage. Listen, did you ever hear of a drone bomber? Yeah, I thought not. Well, let me tell you something, animal. I can lift off a drone bomber and send it right over that site, right over your camp, right over any shelter, and bomb you out of existence, all by remote. You're not as safe as you might think, animal. Johnny just stood there, looking at the black windows of the tank, as the words avalanched through the intercom. You, animal, are going to mine that gold, and you're going to deliver that gold, and you're going to do it all by day 91. And if you don't, I'll blast you and all animals on this planet to hell. You hear me? To hell. His voice ended in a shriek of hysteria, and he stopped, panting. And when day 91 comes, and we've done it all? Turl barked a sharp, hysterical laugh. Then you get paid. You keep your side of the bargain, says Johnny. We'll deliver it. Good, thought Turl. He had cowed the animal. This was more like it. Put that pack on the tank, he said magnanimously. I'll fill the water tank and clean up the place and take care of the sentries. But don't forget my remote control box, You act up. Dead females. Johnny tied the vital pack on the vehicle roof. In the process of doing so, he removed the wave neutralizer and put it behind a tree. Turl will think it being knocked off by the tree branches, maybe. It might be useful. Turl had turned off the bonnet light, and Johnny put the oar back into the sack. He knew Turl wouldn't take it with him. Without saying goodbye, Turl drove off, and the tank vanished. Minutes later, when it was hidden from view and miles away, Donaldine climbed out of a mine hole where he'd been holding a submachine gun in sweaty hands. He had realized the weapon would not do nothing against that tank, but they had not expected Turl to stay in the armored vehicle. Although they would not have shot him, they thought he might have tried to kidnap Johnny if the girls were dead. Donaldine gave a short whistle. 10 more Scots bobbed into view from mine holes, putting their guns on safety. Robert the Fox came down the hill from an old ruined wall. Johnny was still standing there, looking off toward the compound. That demon, said Robert the Fox, is on the verge of insanity. Did you ken how his tongue darted this way and that? His hysteria in his voice, he's hard driven by something we don't know about. We didn't know about that drone bomber, said Donaldine. We know now, said Robert the Fox. McTyler, you know that demon. Wouldn't you say he was borderline daft? Do you suppose he meant to blast you when he drove in? You handled it very well, Johnny McTyler. He's dangerous, said Johnny. 2 hours later, he saw a fire start, a tiny pinpoint of light in the distant cage. Later, a scout would confirm the removal of the sentries, and he himself would check on the water and for Chrissy. An insane Turl was making this a much more hazardous game to play. A treacherous Turl was one thing. A maniac Turl was quite another.